In an effort to complete my year of monthly wrap ups, let's talk about everything I read in December. I'm late, but I have a good excuse. So let's jump into it. Hello, book friends. It's Alyssa. Welcome back to the channel. Hello, if you are new. I'm sorry about the glare off my glasses. Just go with it. I am late doing the last couple wrap up videos for 2024. I was going to film these yesterday when I was alone, but my back was spasming and I just couldn't. I said, F it. And anyway, so here we are. So you know the drill. We've done this a bunch of times. We're going to talk about everything I read in December. First, I'll go through my Storygraph stats. Then I'll go through my Bookly, and we will just take it from there. And without any further ado, let's get into it. In the month of December, I read 22 books, which was 7,079 pages. Please remember that halfway through December, or a week in December, into December, I guess, we started this crazy reading challenge. So my numbers are wacky for December and January. I do not want to read like this going forward. I want the rest of the year to be like a slow, methodical plod through Booklandia. Okay. So 22 books. The average time it took me to finish a book was 23 days, which is funny. And my moods are fairly standard, reflective, emotional, mysterious, dark, adventurous, etc., etc. We don't get to anything funny until the very bottom of the list. Not anything new. My pace was pretty much split between slow and medium with a couple fast-paced books, which I think is interesting. I thought there would be more fast-paced books in here, especially once you got to the reading challenge, but hey ho. Page numbers, doesn't surprise me that the bulk of what I read is under 300 pages, but I did read a couple chunkers, so proud of myself for that. My nonfiction fiction split shifted a bit in December, so we've been working with about an 80-20 split. It's now like 9% nonfiction, 91% fiction, which makes sense for this challenge I was doing. And then my top 5 genres were literary, classics, romance, historical, and contemporary. Not surprised by any of that. And then my average star rating for the month was 3.61, which I don't know if that's the worst ratings I've had or pretty close to. I think it's not the best rated month, but not awful. That's not terrible. 3.6 is not horrible. There were definitely some books in this pile that I did not like. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's move on to my Bookly so we can look at everything I actually read. So we're going to start here with Lies and Sorcery by Elsa Morante. I finally finished this book. I also just sold it on Pango, so I hope whoever is receiving this book loves it more than I did. This was a slog. I did not enjoy myself. If you've been following my newsletter, you know that I was basically torturing myself trying to finish this just out of the sheer will. I don't know. I had to finish it just to know it was done. I guess it's a classic of Italian literature. It is epic. It is a family saga. I just found it heavy-handed, not my kind of writing. It was clunky. It was too much. Characters keep coming back, even though I think they're dead. I don't think that I know enough culturally about Italy to see and connect with maybe some of its brilliance. Um, so I will take on some of the fault on my own shoulders, but it's not for me. It is not a book for me. It is too long. It's too much. Mm-mm, mm-mm. Time of the Flies by Claudia Pinheiro. We talked about this on, or we're going to talk about this on my podcast with Naomi. I can't remember when it's coming out or if it has come out, but anyway, loved this book. We love Claudia Pinheiro. She's an Argentine author. She writes a lot of like crime thrillery fiction, but there's always this political or social kind of commentary that's running through it. Really loved this. It's a follow-up to All Yours, which is a very slim crime novel that she wrote many years ago. And this follows our main character from there after she gets out of jail. It talks a lot about motherhood and marriage and being a woman and the expectations on you, but also gender, politics, in a more broad sense, in terms of like trans rights. It talks about Oh God, so much. There's just so much in here. I loved this book. This was so good. I need to go back to it, I think, and um, really sit with it a bit more because I there's so much in here. It's not just a story of this woman coming out of jail and then getting an offer she kind of can't refuse that might pull her back into criminality. It's I love this. I love Claudia Pinheiro. She always surprises me with how she drags things into a story that you don't think will be there. Yeah, this was good. Bogwife by Kay Chronister. I did not like this book. I don't feel like it gave you any answers at the end of the story. It frustrated me. Covers banging, but I the vibes were kind of right, but you have all these weird siblings that live down south on this like crumbling old plantation. They have some weird connection with the bog in their backyard and like this bog wife, which I don't feel like is well explained in any way, shape, or form. The ending felt rushed and just I don't know. I didn't feel satisfied when it was over in any way, shape, or form. I, I didn't like it. I also sold this on Mango. Did not like this. I did DNF one book, I think, in December, and that was Jane Fairfax by Joan Aiken. This I just found tedious the way it was written. When I finished Emma, I wanted to read a sort of spin off pastiche sort of story about Jane Fairfax, and this was not it. Someone recommended this to me, but this started with Jane all the way back in her childhood. The chapters were very repetitive. I felt like the author was hammering home her point over and over and over again in each chapter. And it's like, I got it. Can we move on? Give me like something interesting to read about. So it got really boring for me. So I did DNF it. There is another one. I can't remember the name of it, but I think I might try one more. But I was disappointed, very disappointed. I know that this is Joan Aiken, I guess, is well loved in sort of the Jane Austen pastiche world, but this one wasn't it, at least not for me. I did manage to finish Terra Nostra by Carlos Fuentes. I can't say that I understood everything that was happening in this, but it did remind me a bit of the experience of reading Gravity's Rainbow, where I'm lost, but I'm also really enjoying myself at times, but also kind of grossed out. But also, there's just a lot. There's a lot to experience. This is talking about Spanish history. It's written by a Mexican author. It talks about colonialism and how we're all kind of doomed to repeat history. It plays with time and it's scatological. I keep saying it's scatological because one, that's a great word, but then two, it just is. There is so much hope in this story. Yeah, it's like offensive, it's gritty, it's beautifully written. It's a trip, man. I need to read this not part of a reading challenge where I can go through this a bit more slowly. I feel like I was just trying to get through and hold on to the pieces that I did understand. So yeah, I will definitely reread this, not anytime soon, but I will reread this at a slower pace because I did enjoy this. Speaking of a reread, we have Stoner by John Williams. And we've been having some really good discussions about this. This was the final Patreon book club pick for the year. And there's been some really good discussions going on, particularly around Edith Stoner. And I feel like vindicated because when I first said in my first review of this, I may do a follow up review video. When I did the original video, I said that I wanted Edith to have like her moment. I feel like she's done a little dirty in this. I don't think she's portrayed well. I think that she's a much more complicated and interesting character than than Stoner. But yeah, so we've had some really great conversations around her and Williams and his alcoholism and the time it's written and maybe why it's having such a resurgence now in the time of family values and all this other stuff. So really great reread. I still think this is a great book because it's such a great book to talk about with others. I think there's so much that you can pull from it. Which is even more amazing when you think about how just really simple this story is. It's the story of one really mundane man. This might be a new favorite, and that's Winter's Tale by Mark Halprin. And this was just a trip. It's whimsical, fantastical. It is an alternate kind of history of New York. Time bends in this as well. There's like this fog that if you fall through, you kind of fall through time in different ways. It feels weirdly nostalgic at times. I just had such a good time reading this. There's so many familiar touch points between scenes in New York City and scenes like up along the Hudson and in the Hudson Valley for me. It was set in winter, so obviously, and so it was just a nice read for December. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I did not watch the movie because I don't know how you can make this into a movie that isn't horrible, but maybe I'll watch it. I did read On Being Ill by Virginia Woolf. It's an essay on being ill and illness and like the lack of illness in literature and other things. And I mean, I guess it's all right. It's not my favorite thing that I read from her. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it here either. I read it. It happened. Sophie from Biblio Sophie was reading it, and it reminded me that I had it, so I picked it up. Yeah, like it's okay. Like I think she pulls out some sort of interesting arguments, but for the most part, she doesn't do a whole lot of anything really revolutionary, I guess, in any way. It's no room of one's own. I read French Exit by Patrick DeWitt, my first Patrick DeWitt. This was hilarious. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. This is a mother and son who've lost all their money. They move into this apartment in Paris, from that a friend of theirs has, and this strange bunch of people end up in their orbit, and it's sad, like it's a dark comedy, but I had a good time. The mom, I feel like you want to hate her, but she grows on you and you really end up liking her. This was a good time. I'm glad that I read this. This was a breath of fresh air in a sea of pretty heavy books in general. So definitely enjoyed it. French Exit and would recommend. I would also recommend The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I don't know why it took me so long to read this. This is by Aunt Anne Bronte. It's my first Anne Bronte. I don't know why we don't read this in high school because this is just a good time. It's also the first time I think I've really liked an epistolary novel, and I've kind of been on a epistolary novel kick, mostly because that was one of the reading prompts for this challenge, but I'm realizing that when done well, I really like it as like a writing style. Woman marries terrible man, woman escapes man with her child, woman meets a not terrible man but can't tell him that she's still married. Eventually, all of her secrets come out, and there is a happily ever after, which I was really grateful for because I was really worried that we were going to get like this very tragic tale, but it was only like moderately tragic. It's risque for the time period. It talks about abuse and alcoholism and a little bit of marital rape, and I need to read Agnes Grey next. This comes out in February in the US, but it is out in the UK and Australia, and that's The Echoes by Evie Wilde. So good, so good. I talked about it a bunch on the podcast. I feel like I've just talked about it a lot. It is multiple timeline story about family trauma, about residential schools with and the treatment of Aboriginal people in Australia. It talks about just how trauma follows you no matter where you go. It blew me away. There's a ghost narrator in it. I cried. I finished Persuasion by Jane Austen. This wrapped up my year with Jane Austen, and there is a review already on the channel, so you can hear all my thoughts there. It is definitely my favorite of all of her novels. A close second is obviously Pride and Prejudice. I love this story. It's like a second chance romance. I think it's beautifully done. You can see if you read from her like early works to her later works how she improves as an author, and it's just so sad that we don't get to see any more development from her because I just imagine she would only keep getting better as time went on. Black Chalk by Christopher Yates. I finally read this. I've had this dark academia on my list for quite a while and just hadn't gotten to it and hadn't gotten to it. And now I feel like maybe I shouldn't have gotten to it. It's just so you have like these six kids, and I think they're at Cambridge, maybe they're Oxford, doesn't matter. They end up joining this like weird society thing where they end up playing some game, and the game is basically like it's kind of like Truth or Dare, but all dares, and you force people into scenarios where they have to do something that's like very much against their own ethics or beliefs, or that might like emotionally hurt them. And then they either do the thing or they forfeit, and then there's like money involved, and the game kind of never ends. somebody dies in the process, of course, and it alternates between the game in college, university, and the present day when they're kind of a little older and the game starting up again. Let's say it like that. I just felt like the game didn't have high enough stakes, but there were some really interesting moments. There's a rant about the miner strike, Margaret Thatcher, that is brilliant. So there is some good stuff in here. It just it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. Moving on. Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Love this classic, great, wonderful Christmas read. I don't know why I don't read this at Christmas more. I don't even know if I've ever read it at Christmas. I think I've read it before. But anyway, loved it. It was great. I watched an adaptation. I don't remember which one after. Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. Fantastic. We talked about this on the podcast, so I will try to remember to link to that video if you want to hear all of our thoughts. But horror story about climate change, environmentalism, mother-child relationships, hyper objects. It's a really interesting book. For such a slim novel, it really, really packs a punch. Totally enjoyed. Definitely recommend. Again, this is by an Argentine author. I feel like the women in Argentina just know how to write some bangers. Anyway, I read the latest volume of Lore Olympus. We're on volume 7. I have 8 pre-ordered. I've been reading this throughout the year, so if you've been following along, you know that this is Hades and Persephone graphic novel retelling. I love it. I love the art. It just makes me happy to read it, and yeah, I read it. Still love it. It's not my favorite volume, but it didn't detract in any way from my love for the entire series. Notes of a Crocodile by Ki Mao Jin. I think I said their name wrong. This is a coming of age epistolary novel about a young Taiwanese girl who is coming to terms both with just kind of growing up, but also her own sexuality and being a lesbian. And it's really interesting. And there's this like metaphor of the crocodile that's going throughout. And I really loved it. It's moving, especially moving when you learn about the author and their suicide and what kind of was happening during this period. I think this is written in the 80s with like this group of these lesbians that were covertly filmed at a bar, and how that it did a lot of damage because obviously there wasn't a lot of like queer rights at the time. Yeah, this is a sad, moving. This is a great book. Really enjoyed this. This is How You Lose the Time War. I really enjoyed this like sort of flowery writing. It's hard for me to describe this, but it's essentially like two opposing warriors leaving notes throughout time to each other. It's an alternate history, and through these notes, they end up falling in love, but it's also like dooming their fates because they can't be in love because it goes against like everything because they're enemies. So it's tragic and beautiful, and it's really good. I need to reread this one as well. I don't want to talk a lot about Blankets by Craig Thompson. It's essentially about growing up in a really Christian family, going to Bible camp, falling in love for the first time, being a teenager, growing up, realizing that you don't believe in the things that were thrust upon you, deconstructing your faith, and then returning home. I mean, it's fine. Some of the art was beautiful. Some of it didn't need to exist. Joan by Catherine J. Chen. This is a historical fiction about Joan of Arc. I don't really know a lot about Joan of Arc. I did enjoy this. I think it's really well done. She doesn't come off as crazy, which I always feel like when I see things referencing her, they make her nuts. And in this, she doesn't seem kind of bonkers. She seems like she's just a smart woman who is into like military stuff. She is here to fight for her people. Like she's a lot more level headed than I think most adaptations up or things about her life depict her as. But I don't know a lot about her, like I said. So yeah. Anyway, I don't know how like well this is generally received, but I enjoyed it. I read A Separate Piece by John Knowles, which is like a classic dark academia. It's set like just around Pearl Harbor at this New England boarding school, and some of the older boys are going and joining the army, and the younger boys are kind of looking at them with this like hero worship. You have these boys that are playing all these games, and they're all kind of wrapped into this idea of we're going to go off to war soon, and we're going to be these heroes. There is a tragic accident that happens. That tragic accident haunts one of them, changes the life of the other. I guess it's moving. I guess it's important, and I think that it's still something that's read in school today. I just don't know if it needs to be. I think there are other books that maybe speak to growing up and the boyhood experience that are maybe more relevant to kids growing up today, particularly boys growing up today. But I mean, it was fine. There's nothing actually wrong with it, and I can see why like a generation would really identify with it. I read Flaubert's Parrot by Julian Barnes. Uh, Beautifully written. I don't think I really care all that much about Flaubert, so like 80-90% of this is like facts about Flaubert, and the other like 10 to 20% is this man who's obsessed with Flaubert and his story and his like dying wife and his obsession with Flaubert. I think if you like Flaubert, how many times can I say Flaubert? I think if you like the author, I think it's probably you probably get more out of it than I did. But it is really well written, which I expect from Julian Barnes. And there are some like really great quotes that are like attributed to Flaubert that I think are pretty like biting and witty and um yeah, so I did enjoy that aspect of it. Yeah, it's fine. I think if it's something that would interest you, pick it up. There's literally nothing wrong with it. I wouldn't have read it if it wasn't for like this reading challenge. So that was a nice find. I think I want to try some more Julian Barnes because I did enjoy the writing. It's just I want to read something maybe that's more like up my alley. And then finally, I read Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri. And these short stories are brilliant and absolutely wonderful. And I do understand why Naomi is obsessed with her as an author, and I would like to read more. There's several stories in here that really stand out. The titular Interpreter of Maladies, of course, is fantastic. But I also really liked the first one. I think starting off the collection with this story about this broken relationship and slowly finding out why they're so broken, why this couple can't connect, except for when the lights are out, and it sort of takes away any. It's like they're anonymous people talking and sharing their feelings, and I really, really loved that. It's about people, it's about partition, it's about immigrant experience. There's so much in these little stories, and I loved it. I understand why she's won a Pulitzer. Really great way. This is the last book I read, so a really great way to end. And that is everything I read. So yeah, another long wrap up video. I'm going to do my big epic everything I read in 2024. I'm going to film that later today, and that will come out after this, obviously. And that's just going to be rapid fire. I'll go through all my stats from 2024, and we'll just rapid fire yes or no like normal because I kind of like doing that giant video every year. It's crazy and insane, and it's nice to do that look back. But yeah, that's everything I read. I didn't bring any books into 2025. I cleared the decks before entering the new year, which was nice. I already have some new favorites for 2025. I've definitely got new favorites from 2024. You can watch that video. I already put that out. But yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you to everybody new who joined me in 2024. We hit some milestones this year. Please remember to subscribe to my Substack. I am doing a year with Edith Wharton this year. We are 30% of the way through our reading of The House of Mirth. So come along, join me. We break it down every week a little bit at a time. And yeah, that's it. I think that's all the housekeeping. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video, whatever it may be, because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want.